Thanks for tuning into the Climb and Flow podcast. Today's guest is none other than Meagan Martin. Meagan's got a long history of competition climbing. She's a ninja warrior beast, and she's got an array of ninja warrior accolades under her belt, and recently has been one of the hosts of the TV show The Climb. And on top of that, she's a mum of a 14-year-old boy. Does that sound about right, Meagan?
14-month-year-old.
14 months. I did. Yeah. 14 months. Yes.
But other than that, everything's correct.
Yeah. Cool. So how like first question, how did you get into climbing?
I was a competitive gymnast, basically from both my parents were gymnasts. So my mom was a gymnastics coach, and she had me in the gym with her as a baby. And then I think I started actually taking gymnastics classes when I was like 5 or 6. And I progressed quickly through the levels in gymnastics. And then when I was about 11 years old, I was a level 9 gymnast, I believe. I started to have some issues with like having a fear of backwards tumbling. Okay. So I ended up quitting gymnastics, and I went to a climbing gym with a friend who had also quit gymnastics recently, and I just fell in love with it. So I'm from Florida, so there's no mountains there. Climbing wasn't like a big thing in Florida, so just having the chance to happen to walk into a gym was kind of lucky at the time. I mean, climbing gyms were like a thing. This is like 2001 or something. Okay. So climbing gyms had become a bigger thing, but it still wasn't like as well known as it is now. So I think I found it in a kind of happenstance, lucky way in reality.
Yeah. So can you remember how you felt the first time you went climbing?
I was just obsessed with it. I mean, I grew up, I was homeschooled for the first, through elementary school. So like I had already been like climbing trees in my backyard and like reading books in my trees and stuff. So I'd already been kind of into climbing without knowing what climbing really was. And the first time I went to the gym, I just was obsessed with it. I loved the feeling of, being challenged and being able to complete climbs that I thought I couldn't, and having to try really hard. And having been a gymnast, I already had a lot of upper body strength. So I felt like that helped with kind of naturally being pretty capable at climbing right from the start. And I just love the feeling of it. I love being up high, all of that stuff.
Yeah. Okay. And kind of like, I guess you got into climbing, and then you started to compete. Is that right?
Yeah, I started competing basically right away. I think when I started climbing at the gym I was at, I think I joined the team within like 5 months of being there. Yeah. Back then, the competition series, there were only like 2. You had like ABS, which was the American Bouldering Series, and then we had the JCCA at the time, which turned into many different things, which is now what you would see like USA Climbing Youth Series or whatever. Yeah. But there was like a local competition at my gym for ABS, and I entered in the beginner category and I won. And then I joined the team after that and started competing on the youth circuit and went to youth nationals my first year and placed 3rd, I believe.
Okay, cool.
Very quick into it.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess your gymnastics background kind of helped with that.
Yeah, and because gymnastics was all about competition, I was already so used to competition. So the natural progression was to go right into competition, especially since outdoor climbing wasn't really accessible in Florida. Yeah. So it was kind of like the next thing to do once I got really into it.
Okay. So did you ever feel that, like in your early days when you're competing, that did you ever feel the pressure of competing, or did you just naturally kind of enjoy it?
At the beginning, I definitely didn't feel any pressure. It was just more of like enjoying it. Granted, I mean, since I had already been a gymnast, I already, was quite competitive. So like, already knowing what disappointment was when you didn't perform the way you wanted to. I already had some of that, but I definitely didn't feel any pressure in that first couple years.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
going into the third year, I'd say for sure I started to feel, and I think in my third year of climbing, I started doing, because there was no bouldering competitions for youth, you had to enter in like the pro competitions if you wanted to compete in bouldering. So I
Yeah. Yeah.
started
Yeah.
doing that and started doing well. And so once that started, I feel like that's when kind of the pressure started building after doing well and, winning competitions against adults and like making money, all that kind of stuff. And actually, because of that, I ended up taking a break from climbing for like 5 or 6 years after climbing for only like 4 or 5 years.
Is okay. So you stopped climbing because of the pressure that you felt.
Yeah, I started to, go to competitions and be so worried about the result and not really enjoying the process anymore. And I
Okay.
remember at the time I had a coach who said I could take a break for a little bit or go to a specific competition. And I chose to take a break, and it turned into kind of a long break.
Okay.
But then I found my way back.
Okay. So when you took a break, what did you? I'm guessing you're quite sporty, right?
Yeah.
So did you get into anything else?
Yeah, so my break started like right as I was entering high school. And so I ended up actually joining the track team, and I started pole vaulting, and I
Wow.
did that. Yeah. I did that all through
Okay.
yeah. Did that all through high school, and then got a scholarship to do that in college as well.
Okay.
And yeah. And once so I went to school in Tennessee, so there's
Yeah.
mountains there, and I was in Nashville, so it was like an hour and a half from Chattanooga, and I actually started getting back into climbing, while balancing being a full-time student athlete,
Yeah.
and
Pole
like some weeks,
vaulting.
yeah, pole vaulting,
Okay.
and so I started like around my junior year of college, I started climbing a little bit
Yeah.
to kind of get back into it, because I realized I missed it, and it was nice to have the opportunity to go outside and climb on a semi-regular, not like super regular, but having easier access to it in Tennessee than I did when I was in Florida. So
Okay.
I was able to kind of like get back into climbing that way, exploring it in a way that I hadn't really spent as much time on when I was younger. So it was kind of
Yeah.
a nice break, from competition. And then eventually I ended up, once I graduated, I got right back into competition.
Yeah. Okay. So what was it that you missed about climbing? What was it that kind of drew you back in?
I mean, I think I've always just really loved movement. And
Yeah.
I think I still do. I think that there's something about being on the wall and being able to move in these ways that, sometimes feel really natural. Sometimes you have to work at it, and
Yeah.
being able to like unlock the way to do something, I think is really fun.
Yeah.
Obviously, it can be frustrating too when it's not
Yeah.
working as easily as you'd like, but I
Yeah.
think that really is the draw. I think I just really enjoy that feeling. And I guess I didn't realize how much I missed it. Granted, I do also think when I got back into it, being able to like explore outdoor places and, have projects and whatnot, I think that was
Yeah.
really fun for me too.
So was it the element of like having to work really hard in the moment to, I guess when you're working really hard on a boulder problem or a climb, you're so engrossed in the moment and physically and mentally trying really hard. Is that what you missed that you didn't maybe get from pole vaulting, or what would?
Yeah, I think I did, because it is, I feel like with climbing, since it's ever changing,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously in competitions you're on something one time, right?
Yeah.
For the most part, you don't really get to go back to it. And then obviously with outdoor climbing, you can go back to something, but still once you complete it, then you're on to something else. Whereas
Yeah.
with pole vaulting, you're kind of doing the same thing over and over and over again, and just fine tuning to increase your height. And so you're like trying to get stronger to be and stronger and faster to be able to jump higher, but you're doing the same thing over and over again. And I think
Yeah.
that felt sort of boring in a sense.
Okay. Yeah.
It wasn't as exciting.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think after 8 years, I was kind of over it.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And then you got back into climbing.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Competing again.
Yeah, so I graduated college in May of 2012, and the first competition I did back was, I think, August or September of 2012,
Yeah.
which was like kind of daunting at the time because it had been like 8 years, I think, 7 or 8 years since I had competed.
Yeah.
And of course, it was hard to not have expectations, even though I had been out of it. I think at the time, my expectation was like at least make semifinals at this, pro bouldering competition, right?
Yeah.
And I ended up making finals, which was awesome.
Okay, cool.
And made me feel like, oh, okay, like even though I've been gone, like I can do this still.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, going into it, I was like, oh gosh, like I hope I don't embarrass myself. That was like the main thing. And like obviously being away from that time of competition, I definitely had the next couple of years for sure. I was having to like learn things that I had missed out on because the style had changed, as it does change so quickly.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it was like a good time to do that. I was in my early 20s, and I mean, there's no better time
Body's
to do
still
that kind of stuff. So. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're not too old yet.
Thanks. Not
You're
too
getting
old.
there, but you're not too. Yeah. It's funny though, because like now in my mind, I'm like, oh, like, even though, I mean, I guess the last competition, the last year I competed, I think was 2019 now. But in my mind, I'm like, oh, I could still go back and do it now.
Of course you can.
I mean, who knows what that would actually look like, but I don't know, since I did it once, even though I'm like much older now, it still feels like somewhat possible. I mean, who knows? I could get very shut down, but like, I don't know. Once you've done it enough, I feel like you think you can kind of get back into it in some capacity if you wanted to.
Yeah. I'm sure if you trained like hard, I don't know. I kind of have that mindset that like it doesn't matter how old you are, if you train well enough for your body, like there's no reason why you can't stay super strong and fit for well into your whatever old age is.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think too, like having already taken time away before, like that there's already like a confidence that things do come back. I mean, I feel like that was helpful with, being pregnant and having a baby. Like I was never really so concerned about losing anything. I mean, I was lucky. I climbed through my whole pregnancy, but even after, like, I didn't feel like a rush to get back because like when it was going to happen, it was going to happen. And like you do what you can.
But that's quite a big thing as a woman, isn't it? Like deciding to have a child or to have children, and if you're a competitive climber or even a competitive athlete, that you might lose that physical ability and having to claw something back that might not be able to be clawed back.
Yeah.
But I guess look at Shauna Coxey. I guess look at yourself. Alex Pucci's just had a baby.
She's just starting.
Yeah. And I've got a couple of friends as well. And I guess their worry was that they might not, get back to climbing. But I guess, as time goes on, we'll see many more female athletes having babies and just getting back to it. Like it was nothing.
Yeah. I feel like what's interesting about that too is that it's really not necessarily. I feel like your body. Well, I mean, I guess everybody's different still, and you do have different like recovery times. But for the most part, like your body understands climbing still and like is likely to come back. But the real thing is like just the time, right? Finding time to do everything.
Yeah.
Like I haven't climbed outside since I had my son, not because I don't want to, but because to me it just is so much easier if I only have a couple hours to go to the gym to get some climbing in versus like trying to go outside and not really climb as much, right? And I mean at some point I'll have more time, but it's just yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
Does your partner climb?
Yeah, my husband is a climber as well. He's a route setter too. So
Okay.
climbing family.
Okay, cool. So your son can't get away from it.
Nope.
Nope.
Yeah, we bring him into the gym, and it's fun too because like now he's like touching the holds and like likes to pretend to brush them, whether it's with the bristles or with the wrong side of the brush.
Yeah. Slowly indoctrinating him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I tried it with my kids and miserably failed.
Oh. You
Yeah.
never know. They might end up liking
Oh,
it.
well, whatever. They've got their own
Yeah,
interests.
whatever they want to do.
Whatever. I'm happy with whatever they choose to do.
Yeah.
So you now, I think you went from climbing to Ninja Warrior.
Yeah, so I did that kind of all at the same time.
Okay.
So in 2014, so I've been back into climbing for like 2 years since my break. I got like an email. There was an email going around. I was living in Boulder at the time, and they were sending out emails looking for more women specifically to try out for Ninja Warrior. And they got a hold of people's emails in the climbing community, and I ended up with one. And some of the guys that were already on the show in Colorado lived near me, and they were like, oh yeah, you should come out and like try it with us, whatever. And so I was like, oh, okay, like why not? Like I remember this show from high school, like watching the Japanese version.
Yeah.
And so I just like went to like a ninja gym a couple times and then like made a video and went and competed and completed the course the first time. So like I just like it all kind of happened, and I didn't really know what was happening because I didn't know as much about it as maybe I should have. And then from there I just did it for, I guess I did it for, I don't know, like I don't know how many years, 24, like 6 or 7 years, I think.
Yeah.
Kind of got like sucked into it. I think the last year I did it must have been 2018.
Okay.
Unless it was either 2018 or 20. Oh no, that's not true. Wait, it was longer than that because I did it in 2020. 2021 might have been the last year. Yeah, because then I was filming the climb, and basically once I wrapped filming that, they were like, "Oh, come back and try out again," or like we're competing, and I'd been filming for like 4 months, and I was like, I'm not in shape to go to the Warrior. So yeah, I think 2021 was the last year I did it.
Okay.
Yeah, so a long time.
And what was that like? What was it like competing in the Ninja Warrior?
I always thought it was very stressful. It's similar to like climbing, right? I basically like.
I don't know. I've never done Ninja Warrior, so.
I don't mean. Well, it is kind of similar to climbing that way, but I meant more like the pressure, like having success early, creating like that mental pressure. So like the first year was super fun, but then it was like I did all these things in the very first year, and then I was like always stressed to like keep doing them. So it was always like very nerve-wracking for me. Once I was like on the course doing obstacles, it was fun. But like I was definitely like I would have like nightmares like months before about like failing early.
Yeah, the anticipation of the actual event. Yeah.
More so than with climbing, especially since most of my I did compete in lead as well quite a bit climbing, but probably more on the bouldering side still. And with bouldering, it's not like one shot and you're done. You have 5 minutes or 4 minutes, so like you can fall. Whereas with Ninja Warrior, it's like you go, you fall, you're out, similar to lead climbing. And I feel like that's just like a more intense pressure.
Yeah. So how did you deal with that pressure?
I did a lot of like positive self-talk, especially right before I was going out, because like if I was standing below the stage before like stepping on, like if I wasn't talking to myself in a positive way, I would likely be crying because I was so nervous. So I would just like sit there and like continue to do like warm-up stuff and being like, this is fun, you're gonna have fun, you're good at this, like one obstacle at a time, like breathe, like that kind of stuff. otherwise I would just be too nervous and probably start crying.
Yeah. I did watch in the last week. I did watch a couple of clips on YouTube of you doing some Ninja Warrior stuff, and I think the one thing that really one of the things that stood out was that I could see you stopping after each obstacle and standing there, kind of taking a couple of breaths and shaking your hands and kind of collecting your thoughts, and then you kind of jump on and just get on with it. I'm guessing I didn't see you doing any prep work for any climbing comps, but was that kind of, I guess, similar to your competitions when you got ready for those?
Yeah, I would say it's similar. I feel like taking a moment to reassess is always like a good thing to do. Obviously, if you're lead climbing, that has to be like on the wall, but from section to section. But for bouldering, yeah, for sure. I mean, you fall a couple times, you stand there, shake out, kind of rethink what's going on in your time frame. I feel like that was totally applied to, finishing each obstacle on the course. I feel like I was doing a similar kind of thing. It's funny though, because they only let you stand there for so long. So like,
really?
Yeah, they'll be like, you gotta go. Yeah.
Why?
You're just not allowed to stand there for too long. There's like a time limit. Mm-hmm.
That's really strange.
Yeah.
So it's your time. Surely you can choose how you prepare yourself, right?
Yeah, but also like things can come down to you also from a strategy standpoint wouldn't want to stand for too long, because if you complete the course, it doesn't really matter. Well, it still goes down to time, but you should still be okay because people who complete it automatically move into the next round. But if you were to fall, it goes down to time of last completed obstacle. So you also wouldn't want to stand for too long.
Yeah,
okay. They make you keep moving a little bit.
Okay. Is that more kind of the TV side of things?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. That's frustrating.
Yeah.
They don't do that in climbing, do they? I guess you get a set amount of time
and countdown clock, but yeah, you know, right? Like that's a little different. Yeah.
So, I guess do you miss competing?
I do a little bit. Yeah. And I think I only do though, because it's been a while since I have competed.
Yeah.
It's funny because since I commentate, I do kind of get a little bit of that competition aspect still from a different lens, which I think is nice. I think that helps me not miss it as much, right? Because I get to watch other people have to do it, and like it is a lot mentally and physically, right? So I miss aspects of it, but I wouldn't say I like miss it too much. I might do a competition randomly this year, just like for fun.
Yeah.
But I do think
without expectation.
Well, with like a tiny bit of expectation, just like a little bit.
Okay.
I would say my expectation is to get through the round.
Yeah. Okay.
And have fun and possibly make semifinals. I think would be would be good. Especially since like I only generally these days climb a couple hours at a time, so like a 3-hour red point round would be a lot for me.
Yeah. Okay.
But
so sounds like you're quite a driven personality.
Yeah, I would say
quite
for
focused.
the most part. Yeah.
Got a lot of drive. So how did you, I guess, when you were competing, how did you deal what once you kind of got back into climbing, or even the Ninja Warrior stuff, and you start to come back and you realized you were quite good at these things? How did you deal with the expectation in the competitions thereafter?
I think it took a couple, I think especially coming back into climbing, because I was having success, but I definitely, I didn't make finals at bouldering nationals the first year I was back. So I did have to like work a little bit more to get back to where I was for the most part. So I think that was helpful, just to kind of have to go through some of those steps a bit more. And I really just focused a lot on enjoying everything, like enjoying the training, enjoying like learning how to be better at some of my weaknesses, and then applying all that to competition. And obviously it can be frustrating still when, like, maybe the results don't look exactly how you want them, but I found that I was still having a good time, and like, especially climbing with the people I was climbing with and competing with the people I was competing with, that I think it helped me focus on more of the joy and like just the excitement of getting better at things that you weren't as good at, versus worrying about the results as much, and really focusing on that from the competitions. Like, even if the result was good, like, how was the climbing, So I think changing that mindset a little bit was helpful. And I found too that I did perform better too when I was in a better mental state, and like focusing more on having fun and just being really present.
Yeah. And is that where your focus was in competitions too? Is just trying to have fun?
Yeah, trying to have fun and like trying to implement the things I was working on in training, right? Like trying to, like, if I'm in a bouldering round, trying to be more efficient and not make like silly mistakes, versus like being like, oh, I placed this placement versus that placement, like not really caring about that, but like, oh, like I was really efficient on, the first 3 boulders, and I didn't let it get in my head when I couldn't do the 4th one, like that kind of stuff I would focus more on when I was reflecting on how the competitions went. Things that were actually tangible to change, because placements, they just like are what they are. You don't really have control over anybody but yourself, right? So if you're focused too much on actual placements versus how your climbing is going and how you're like approaching the competition and what you're doing well and what you're doing or what you could improve upon, I think all of that was good to focus on.
Yeah, I see a lot of not just in climbing but other sports as well. You can have a lot of really super strong athletes in their sport. And then when it comes to competition time, I do sometimes see people like completely crumble, which is just their head getting in the way. Like there's a really cool series on Netflix about like these famous tennis players.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and when you watch it, like if you were to take their mind away in these competitions, like the difference in performance between these people would be marginal. And like these people under the pressure of potentially expectation and competition, they just crumble.
Yeah, the mental side of things, I think, is so much bigger than people realize. And once I feel you have that under control, then your body can just kind of do what it knows how to do.
Yeah. So how do you, I got 2 questions here, I guess. How do you what do you perceive to be failure when you're competing, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah, I guess looking back at competitions, I would probably consider the failure being more if I was falling back into old habits of, getting frustrated and like mental blocks or something within a round where you're like not thinking clearly and you're just kind of spazzing out trying to like make things work with your body when you're not actually taking a second to regroup and try to relax so that things can actually work out. I would look at that more as failure than actual like placement failure. Let's see. I mean, I feel like one of the more frustrating things too would be, especially back doing World Cups, like I feel like they used to be so good at like putting little jibs on the wall that you couldn't tell were there if you weren't, fully looking at the boulder problem well enough, like stupid mistakes like that where you like miss a hold or like drop a top because you're like rushing it, that kind of stuff I would perceive more as failure than, and then I guess that falls into the placement generally, right? When you're making mistakes like that, but yeah, and I think that all comes down to a lack of being fully present too, and being a little distracted by just being in that competition atmosphere. So I think that would be more of the failure than actual, because at that time too, it's funny because I feel like if I was competing now, I bet it would come back to being just like not prepared physically, whereas back then I was so prepared physically that that's not even an excuse.
Yeah.
That's like the easy out, right?
Yeah. So how did you deal with it? I guess like when you I guess had a small mistake that you perceived to be a failure. How did you deal with that afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely times where, right afterwards, once I was like no longer out there and like by anybody, I would probably cry a little bit, because it is upsetting when you've worked so hard, right? And then you make stupid mistakes like that. That is hard, and I think it's totally appropriate to grieve those mistakes a little bit. And then I think after that, I would try to just figure out what to do next time to not let that happen, and try to focus on that in my training in between. But yeah, those kind of things, they do stick with you, right? Like you're falling asleep at night and all of a sudden, you're trying to fall asleep at night, and like in your dreams, you're, replaying that moment in your head for like months or whatever. Like that kind of stuff definitely would happen to me. But then I would just try to like let it go and, try to focus on what I could do in the meantime in between those competitions, and hopefully not make those same mistakes the next time.
Yeah. I think speaking to quite a few people, they make I guess they're supposedly whatever failure means, right? They make it's more I guess a learning point. I guess speaking to a few people, they've made those. They've come to a point in, I guess, their career and really came to a head wall with something, and then instead of allowing it to kind of rule them, they've tried to make it a strong point of theirs. Yeah. So what, I guess, what do you feel in, I'd say climbing, because it's the climbing podcast. What do you feel in climbing is your are your mental strong points?
I would definitely say like being able to flip a negative to a positive quickly. I don't generally get too bogged down by the negative. I think I can try to find the silver lining in a lot of things, in order to move forward. I think just being able to bounce back from that quickly is really helpful from a mental side. And then I think I am pretty good at being present in the moment, in order to try to be as successful as possible in those moments, and not get too distracted. Definitely something I had to work on, but I think it was something over the years that I definitely got better at. And then just like being able to try really hard, like I feel like that's like a thing that you need to be able to do, like to really just fight in those moments where you need to fight. Obviously it doesn't always work out, but there were definitely moments where, I fought so hard and it got me into that next round. And so I think that was like important to be able to do that. You never want to like give up, right? And I feel like with most successful athletes, that's what they do. But it is interesting because as a commentator, I've definitely watched people give up in competition, and I feel like that's something I would never do.
I guess I've seen your again, making massive assumptions. I guess are you a stubborn personality?
I probably would say that I'm not, but I probably am in some regards. I bet if you talk to my husband, he would tell you that I can be
Next
stubborn.
podcast with your husband.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I definitely can be in some scenarios for sure.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I do see that a lot. Like, I think it's definitely a skill, like to be able to kind of tap into the moment and to give it everything you've got without giving up. And I think when you look at the high-end athletes, they all have, or most of them have, that ability to to put everything out on the line.
Yeah, exactly. Which is like also it can be like a vulnerable place to be, but I think over time you get used to it and like you just
Yeah.
do have to put it all out there.
Yeah. And it's definitely a skill. I think it's it's something that I do see in a lot of people that they do give up. Like when you watch them climb, they, instead of giving it everything they've got, they kind of just let go.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the try hard thing. Like I developed a workshop a couple of years ago, teaching people how to tap into that try hard, and it is something that doesn't just happen overnight. It's something that you have to work towards. Yeah,
It's so true. It's interesting too because I would notice it too, like with people who just start climbing. Like there's a lot of people who, it's funny because like they're so close to finishing a climb, right? And
yeah,
you expect them to keep going, and
yeah,
then they just like drop off, and you're like, what? No, like you have to try to the end. What are you doing?
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
funny because it's like in my brain, I'm like, well, that's what you do, but yeah, I guess it's not as innate in every person to do that.
Yeah.
And you know, there's also like fear of like falling and whatnot. Like I think as an athlete too, especially like competition climbing, right? You're never thinking about like, oh, this is scary. Like, oh, I don't want to fall here. You're just like going for it. And
Yeah.
it's funny because once I started commentating, I like would do a lot of forerunning. And I even noticed myself, you know, forerunning these boulders at these competitions and being far more hesitant than I ever would in a competition because like there's nothing on the line for me forerunning. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't want to get hurt. But in a competition, not even a thought about that.
Yeah.
Like just going for it.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. It is. I know. I think like I perform better in front of people than I do by myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
Even,
I would agree with that myself as well, but I don't think everybody is that way though.
no, I think some people don't like others watching, and might find it uncomfortable to especially compete, being bigger crowds. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we asked your strong points. What do you feel what mental challenge or what mental aspect within climbing do you feel that you have to work on?
I think one of the things is, you know, not thinking about your weaknesses when you turn around and like look at, or if you were in a competition, if you were to turn around and like look at a boulder and you see something you know you're not good at, like not letting that get into your head. I feel like that was something that it's always so easy to be like, oh no, they want me to do this, and like I'm not good at this, you know.
Yeah.
And I still do that now. I'm like, oh, that toe hook, I can't do that toe hook. I'm not good at toe hooks, like whatever. And you know, kind of avoiding getting into that thought process and
So
just being like, okay, I'm gonna do it this way.
yeah. So it's the negative self-talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do a lot of positive self-talk, but it is hard when you see something that you know you're not as good at,
Yeah.
and not letting it get into your head in the moment, I guess.
Yeah. There's an interesting video that I watched, and I made some notes on that, of you doing the psych block or psycho block in 2014 against Alex, and you were both climbing, and I think you got 3/4 of the way up, and the commentator was commenting about you, a ninja warrior, and saying something negative. And just as he said that, you fell off. Now, either that's completely coincidental, or there's part of me thinking, like, just those negative words, whether you were aware of it or not, just kind of, made you feel weaker.
Yeah. Was that against Alex Puccio?
It was, yeah. I think it was Alex. Yeah.
I remember that route. I definitely, that route, that section was not, I hadn't had it figured out as well as I should have. But that is interesting. I think it was coincidental, but I would also say maybe because I don't think we could hear him. But for her, I don't even know who was commentating. But I do, I mean, as a commentator, we talk about this all the time, like the commentator curse. You don't want to say something and then have it like happen, or say something negative and have it happen. So I do think there is still power in that.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. So there's part of me saying, oh, this guy should shut up, really.
Yeah, no, 100%.
yeah, completely. Cool. So if you would give one piece of mental advice to climbers looking to improve the mental side of climbing from the perspective of you as a coach, and the perspective of you as an athlete, one, would that be any different? And two, what would those things, or what would that be?
I don't think they would be different. I think it would still be the same from an athlete or a coach. I would say, I think the most important thing is to always be in a good headspace. And like, if you're not enjoying what you're doing, like, it's not going to go well. You're not going to improve. You're not going to do well in a competition. Like, so you really need to like find the joy in climbing or do something else. Like, if it's not giving you anything, I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah. Go pole vaulting.
Yeah. Right. Or like just take a little break, reassess, maybe like refocus things. Because you should be enjoying it. Yeah,
of course. Yeah.
And that's the way that you're going to excel. And I mean, I also think that like you should learn to kind of enjoy failure a little bit, because like if you're not failing, you're not improving. So like look at it in a positive frame and figure out how to apply it to your training. Yeah.
I think like in Western society, like I when I run the workshops, I do get people to tell me what they perceive failure to be. And I think it's just about reframing it. And failure, like we go to school and everything's about results and everything's result focused, that like we are indoctrinating everyone to be scared of taking risk and learning.
Yeah, which it's like, how do you expect to be better if you're not taking risks and learning and failing? That's part of the process.
Of course, exactly. It'd be like your little one jumping on his bike for the first time, falling off and going, can't do this, not doing this again.
I'm done. Exactly. That's just not how it works.
No.
It is, you're right. It's like everyone gets so obsessed with success and like not wanting to fail at all, but like that's impossible. And like that's part of it. Like, and that's part of climbing. That's cool, right? Like being able to fail and have to work really hard at something and figure out how to solve the puzzle. Like that is part of the joy of it.
Yeah. It's building resilience, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's getting, I think, and even in climbing, I guess it depends what you really want for climbing, but most people will climb something, they'll climb whatever grade it is, and then kind of go, oh, let's challenge myself and let's do the next one, and so on until you get to a point where you do fail and fall and all those things. Cool. Thanks for your time, Meagan. I'll let you get back to,
of course.
I'll let you get back to the family, and thanks for featuring in my book.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for including me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, cool. So thank you, listeners, for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast with Meagan and learned a little bit more about Meagan and competition climbing. And we'll see you guys next time.